meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of September 2025. As ever, I'd just like to remind everybody present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. Item 1 on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence. I've not been notified of any apologies, but I'll defer to the clerk.
Thank you, Chair. No, we've not received any apologies, but I have noticed that Councillor Fletcher is not with us this evening.
Yeah, actually, I take back what I said. He did actually, on an unrelated matter, he did mention actually that he wouldn't be able to make the meeting. He had tried to find a substitute, but was unable to. So item 2 then is to receive the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of July and the 7th of August, as outlined in the agenda. Do members have any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No? Okay. In that case, the minutes can be taken as approved. Item 3, declarations of interest. There's none declarations from me, but do members have any declarations they wish to declare? No, thank you. Item 4 on the agenda concerns unplanned scrutiny business and members' right of reference. I've not been made aware of any such issues, but again, I'll defer to the clerk just in case you've been notified of anything.
Thank you, Chair. No, there isn't anything for these items.
Thank you very much. Okay, so on to the substantive business then. I've been asked if we can change the order of business so that we take item 8 first of all, which is Q4 financial outturn 2024-25. I've got no objections to that. Are members happy for us to take that item first? Yep, okay. So over to you, Dawn.
We did actually do a slide, just some slides, if that was easier. I think Lucy's going to load them up for us. Or So just while we're waiting for those slides to be loaded up, so what we've got here is basically our outturn report for last financial year. So that shows how we actually performed against our budget for 24-25. In the budget report, we tried to put quite a comprehensive executive summary, so it was just, you could sort of have just a read of the summary if you couldn't get through all the report. So basically what we've got on the slides, are they coming? So what we'll do then is, until the slides are coming up, so what this report covers is it covers our general fund revenue budget. It covers how we did against our targets for, it looks like we're getting there, how we did against our savings targets that were built into the 24-25 budget. We're being transparent about what we spent of our transformation funding, which is what is a reserve that sits on our balance sheet, general fund reserves usage, the housing revenue account, capital programme for both general fund and HRA, how we were doing against dedicated schools and an update on our asset disposal programme. So basically just as we all understand, is these figures remain provisional until the conclusion of our statutory audit process for the 24-25 accounts. So our 24-25 accounts have been produced. They are currently in their statutory consultation period, which I think finishes around mid-September. I don't think we've received any formal objections or anything to the accounts, which is good. And then obviously once that statutory consultation period is concluded, our external auditors will come in and do their audit work on that statement of accounts. So these figures all remain provisional until then, but I'm not anticipating any changes. So in terms of what the budget that we set last year, so we set a revenue expenditure budget of over £250 million. That budget funded our operating budget. So when we say operating, we mean delivery of our services. It funded our treasury budget of 79.7 million. So that is the money that we need to fund our debt financing costs. And obviously our core funding of £168 million doesn't cover that. So therefore we needed exceptional financial support, which we received through a capitalisation direction of £96.4 million. So that was our overall budget position. Against that budget position, we are reporting a provisional underspend of 21.8 million against our general fund budget. Now, what the report recommends in terms of that that underspend position is that 13.7 million of that underspend is a one-off contribution to the council's debt position. Because obviously that's helpful, because if we reduce our debt, we therefore reduce our treasury costs, etc. And then just over £6 million of the underspend, Cabinet agreed to move that into a reserve for us on our balance sheet, and that is specifically earmarked to fund our transformation roadmap. And so that's where that funding is sitting. Next. Do you want to move the slide? Do you want to next slide? Thank you. The report also covers how we achieved against our savings targets for 24-25. So our budget had a savings target of 19.866 million built into that budget. So the council did very well. So 93% of the savings were delivered in full. 2% of the savings were mitigated, so i.e. the original saving couldn't be made, but the service found a mitigation for that, which was acceptable. And we had a figure of 5%, so just over £1 million that remained unachieved. Now, a couple of those savings were formally written out of the budget when we set the budget for 25-26, and we have about £750,000 of those savings that have been carried forward into this year. And when we're doing the savings tracker for this year, it's clear that those savings are on there, and we need to achieve them, because some of them were just they just slipped, so we carried forward into this year. The HRA, so our housing revenue account, is a separate ring-fenced account that underspent by 5.3 million, and the Cabinet approved a recommendation to put that onto reserves. The dedicated schools grant, so the DSG, that was a minor underspend of 222,000 against our budget of £62 million. Obviously, we are very well aware that we have, against our DSG plan, moving up to, I think it's 28-29, we have a deficit against that plan of around about £20 million. And obviously, the council is working very closely with DFE, as all councils are. This is not an issue that's unique to Thurrock. In fact, our deficit is considerably less than some councils. And I can't remember the name of the programme, but we are on the Send Best Value programme to try and manage that position. So obviously we came in just slightly under where we thought we were going to be, so that was very positive. Next slide. Sorry, just a bit boring. So on the General Fund Capital Programme, we got a provisional outturn of, so we spent about 12 million of our £20 million budget, and we're anticipating slippage. We didn't approve the slippages at the outturn. We're going to put that into the Q1 report, because we just wanted to do a little bit more checking on the slippage. And I think this is something that we need to pick up for this year, because people will argue that that's still quite a low spend against our budget, and why we're not seeing, trying what we can to spend our capital programme. We have the HRA capital programme. So we spent about 31 million against our £39 million budget. So that was better, that's quite good, and we'll just slip the balance into this year. It's quite common to have slippages on your capital programme, because sometimes you might just not be able to get a scheme done. Further work might be needed. You might have a delay in planning, or challenges about getting through planning. And it is, I would argue that sometimes it is better to slip than start a scheme if it's not ready to go. And then finally, we have our asset disposal programme. So we are all aware that the council has a programme of assets to dispose of, to generate a capital receipt to pay down our debt. The asset disposals were, you can see from the figures, were a little bit behind in last financial year. But what we have done is, when we bring the Q1 report to this Cabinet, is that it's been reprofiled over the last few years to make so the programme itself will be delivered in full. It's just there has been a little bit of slippage, but I think that's because a lot of the, I suppose, lower hanging fruit of the asset disposals have been sold at the start of the programme, and now we are getting onto those proposals that maybe just need a little bit more challenging, need more preparation, etc. So that wouldn't seem unreasonable. So that sort of covers all the areas of the budget that were reported in the outturn report. And I think just on the last slide. Now, what we recognise is that is quite a considerable underspend. And whilst it's great that we have an underspend, obviously we are a counselling intervention, etc. So we needed to look at that. So in the out-term report, and what I was very conscious of is when we set our budget for this financial year, we built quite a lot of growth, etc., into that budget. So we really needed to look at, do we need all that growth? So what we've been doing in preparation for quarter one, so the quarter one monitoring report will go to September Cabinet. We committed to do a full budget rebase, review of budget forecasting process. So we've been reviewing that, because I think what we found from 24-25 is something simple as we had some surprise. Our underspend at year end was has shifted quite considerably from quarter three. Now, although it's good that the underspend increased, we have to be realistic. It could have gone the other way, which wouldn't have been helpful. So we needed to review our forecasting position, and so we have done that. And I think some things we were not looking at something as simple as, for example, not looking at actuals to date, where we'd seen that we got some money in and we weren't forecasting that right till the end, where actually if it's actual to date, we should have been looking at that. I think what's also helpful across the finance team is we are going through our recruitment to get to our permanent staffing structure. So, I mean, I've got my colleague Jasbir with me, who is now our permanent head of, I always get the job title wrong, but your strategic finance, and looks after our MTFS. So that's helpful. So we're getting that continuity in now as well, which is helpful. We said we would have a look at a rebasing exercise of the budget. So because we underspent so much, should that budget still stay within them services? Should we take it back centrally? And when you'll see the quarter one report, you will see the work that we have been doing about where we potentially can identify those areas. We're not going to report that as an underspend at quarter one. We're being very transparent in the report, saying let's just do a little bit more work, and we'll report it out at quarter two when we've done all the work that we can in preparation for quarter two reporting, which comes to December, and it'll also be built into the MTFS refresh that will come to November Cabinet. We said we would do a review of the 25-26 budget growth requirements, because if we've underspent so much, do directorates really need all that budgeted growth? And so we've flipped how we do growth. So even though we had it provided in the budget, we've made the services justify why they need it. And you'll see in the quarter one report that we are not recommending to allocate out all the growth. We will hold that growth centrally and then see what we're going to do with that growth. Does it go back? Does it go to reduce debt? Do we take it out of the budget, etc.? We're doing a review of the council's current capital programme, because we had their messages with slippages. So the council does have a capital programme, 3-year capital programme that goes up to 28-29. So when we review the capital programme this year, we will not be, normally what you do is a year falls off and you add a year on, you do a rolling programme, but obviously because our programme takes us up to, it follows this, it's the same, covers the same years as the MTFS, and then that takes us up to LGR. There's no point in adding another year on. So we're going to do a thorough review, and being honest, our review is to try and remove some stuff from, some lines from the capital programme. So, for example, if a scheme hasn't been spent for the last couple of years, why would you keep it in the programme? Obviously, if we bring capital out of the programme, we can save on. We don't have to borrow that money. We can save on money, or because we know we've got a transformation programme coming up, which might need some capital expenditure, we can move that capital over to our transformation roadmap to support the transformation the council needs to do. So what we are anticipating of the programme is that we're not anticipating any significant additions to the programme unless it's sort of rolling programme and health and safety. The only real additions that we will hopefully see going into the programme are really what's linked to the transformation programme. If that's what the council's focusing on, it will only be capital to support that transformation. And when we do all that review process, so we've done a scope of what we're going to do. That's been agreed by SLT. It's been agreed by Councillor Maurice Cook. The agreement of what does go in the capital programme, we're going to put it through a board where we'll have good representation from across the council, and Councillor Maurice Cook will chair that board. So what we do put in the capital programme will have had a good test before it goes in the capital programme. And then finally, the HRA is currently subject to a separate review process. we're not, I'll be honest with you, we're not progressing as maybe as quickly as we should be doing, but we are reviewing the HRA as well. And it's not saying there's anything wrong with the HRA, it's just making sure a due diligence check that it's robust. We've got the level of balances that we need to have. We've got sufficient contingency in there. And it's very clear when the HRA business plan comes back to Cabinet in December, that it's very clear what our business plan contains. So it's very visible and transparent to everybody about what the aspiration is, what we're assuming about rents, new bills, etc. So that's really this report in a nutshell.
Thanks very much, Dawn. This was a really comprehensive report, and your presentation, I think, has been really helpful in just drawing our attention to the most salient points. For my part, I mean, I'm glad you can fall into the trap of thinking that underspends are a good thing. They're always better than overspend, obviously, but you're quite right. For a council that's in intervention, or for a council of our size, even if we weren't in intervention, this is a considerable underspend, and it kind of calls into question how prepared we are, how good we are at budget forecasting and making sure you've got services that are overspending in one area, yet across the board we've got this quite large underspend. And I think, you know, it's heartening to hear that we recognise that although it could be worse, work needs to be done to recalibrate really our budget forecasting to make sure we get it right, and that's, I think, borne out by the Commissioner's comments. I was also pleased to hear what you said about the capital programme. I think we have a long history at the Council of sometimes keeping money sitting in the capital programme for years and not spending it. When I was a Cabinet member, when I first became a Cabinet member, I was really surprised to see money that had been held on a rolling basis for years for schemes which officers admitted the money would never fund, and there was no prospect of topping that money up, so it just sat there. That's not, you know, that's not, it's not, I was going to say, it's not a good use of that money. It's not a use of the money full stop, so I welcome that as well. But I'll open it out to questions. Any questions for members? Councillor Cecil.
Yes, thank you for your report. Reading through the whole document, what struck me was quite a lot of understaffing. Have you suffered from any understaffing, and has any of your underspends been due to the fact that you haven't got enough staff to oversee what should have been happening?
Jim, can I just clarify? Do you mean in my finance teams? Yeah. I mean, in the finance team, we do still have a number of vacancies. So when I arrived last year, so I've got about 150 staff. About half of those are my Revs and Bens team, and about half covers finance, audit, risk, etc. When I arrived, we had about 26 vacancies. Now, they weren't vacant, they had the agency staff in, and we have been through a process of recruitment. So I'm currently on my 4th recruitment round, so we have to do sort of 5-6 posts at a time. And we're doing that through recruitment agencies who will actively go out and search for staff. So I think, I mean, my structure is my establishment is my establishment. I think that the teams work very hard. I think that, so I don't think not having a full establishment contributed to this. I think what is helping now is that we're getting permanent staff in. Coping with a churn, yeah, consistency. So, you know, what's good this year is the people that set the budget are monitoring it this quarter, whereas we've suffered from that churn, that considerable churn of agency staff. So, for example, I got a first, about the same time as Jasbay started, John Chance, our chief accountant, started. We've had, and I think, so that meant that last year I had 3 chief accountants in a year. Because we had 2 agency staff and then we had John come along. That doesn't help. But I also think one of the reasons, and we've just had, I think one of the reasons why that we have got some underspends now, I think it's just because we talked about this in an earlier meeting. I think Dave made some conclusions which were really helpful. We are really obviously trying to get a real grip of our financial management, and we are looking at things very differently. So we are, for example, We are really looking at our grants. So when our grants come in, we are really scrutinising our grants. How is that grant used? What can be used? We look at our grants from a corporate perspective. We are trying to be very vigilant. So, you know, can we use any of those grants to support wider things across the council rather than just letting the services keep them grants? I suspect that services have been allowed to keep them in the past and have maybe had an accumulation of grant money in their budget. We are really taking that centrally and saying, how is that best spent for the council? We have been really diligent on fees and charges. If we put our fees and charges up, they need to come into the benefit of the MTFS. We've been allocating our budgets very differently. So before, for example, in adult services, the methodology was the service would get all their increase in their specific grants. They would get the value of the adult social precept. They would also get on top all their inflationary pressures. It's very unusual. Most authorities won't do that. So we've changed all that. So I think it's a mixture of I think people work really hard on this forecast and we're being really transparent about where our underspends are. But we are still trying to get our establishment recruited too. As I say, we're on our 4th recruitment round. We'll probably recruit 3 of the 5 posts we've had out through this round. After this round, I estimate I've still got about 12 posts vacant, so we're looking at having to do another 2 further recruitment rounds for the rest of the year. So it's a challenge, but having permanent staff in just makes such a difference.
Beg your pardon. Are you looking clearly as whether you had too much money in there as regards staffing, and maybe you can reduce your staffing complements?
Once again, is it for finance or across the piece? Sorry, are you talking about the finance team or across the piece?
Your team.
Right. I certainly haven't got too many people in my finance team. We're a very small team. I accept that. But so no, I haven't got any spare budget. In fact, the challenge for me at the moment is I'm actually overspending on my salary budget because I've got agency in, and obviously agency tend to cost more on than permanent staff. We are looking at trying to move people onto fixed term contracts. We are constantly, as I say, in a period of 18 months, we are on our 4th recruitment campaign. So we're doing everything we can to get them staff posts filled with permanent staff, so we can get back actually to just so that I'm not overspending. I think in this report I overspent by about £1 million last year, and I'm probably going to have about 400,000-500,000 overspend this year on my salary budget. So I haven't got too many staff, no.
Thank you. Councillor Green's indicated, but just before I bring him in, actually, I think Councillor Cecil's hit on an interesting point, because it's interesting to hear you say how you feel your team's understaffed and there's a pressure there, but in highways and transport, there's a huge underspend in that department because of a reduction in staff, yet that doesn't seem to have impacted on service levels. I mean, that is a huge underspend. Again, it comes back to, are we, is there a piece of work to be done to look at, staffing across the organisation? Because we seem to have some teams that are, and I know some of it's based on the inability to recruit. Recruitment isn't easy at Thurrock, but we seem to have services where we've got really big underspends because we've either reduced staff or we haven't recruited to vacant positions, yet that hasn't impacted service levels at all. Yet in other areas we can see there are chronic pressures because of understaffing. So again, I think that's a valid point that Councillor Cecil raises, because I think we do need to look at staffing levels across the organisation, because that does seem to be a bit out of kilter as well.
I'll answer that one, if that's okay. So it is something that I can assure you, looking at our potential of cost savings, it is something that is looked at across the piece. And, it's very interesting when you're saying that, money has come out of services and there has been no impact to service. A lot of that is by looking at how we can and rather than how we can't. And I suppose if you took place, for instance, if you look at lots of what they're doing with frontline services there, they have a scheme, it's like called Flow to Work. So there's a lot of cross-training of, whereas people would just specifically cut, people would specifically do weeding, people would specifically trim. Where there's actually cross-training now, people move into how they do it. So actually you get a much more efficient service. But, you know, I can assure you, especially, you know, in my position as Cabinet Member for Resources, it is something that we look at. It is something, but you can't do, you know, as much as I'd love to do everything thing and go to it like a bull in a china shop, it would be just unachievable. So you've got to pick your battles and pick the ideas of where you think you need to go. But absolutely, you know, it's the way to do it, how we can improve. The use of AI, repetitive tasks, you know, it's everything there is being looked at.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. On the in the budget, we've got weekly food collection grant at £500,000. We're over budget by £32,000. Have we gone back to government to see if we can increase that grant?
We get our grants based on an allocation, so our grant will be what our grant will be. We wouldn't get a further allocation.
Okay, so if we're over budget by 32,000, what reason would that be if they've allocated that and they've obviously done some out-term for that?
I'd need to go back and ask Claire. I think you find the original budget was for the cost of the caddies that was coming through. I know it's been very successful on how it says. It could be, and I don't know, it could be that it's not the full year equivalent because obviously it was rolled out as a rolling programme, and going forward this year you'll have the full year effect and the tonnage, and you'll get the sort of money back for the tonnage that's gone in there. But you know, it is something I can ask Claire, and I'll ask her to give the answer to. Oh, you've got the answer.
No, I think what this section is saying is that this is part of the capital programme, and what we're saying is we actually got an increase in the food collections grant, and that was put into the budget. So we didn't overspend, we actually got a national capital grant of 32,000.
But just to allay your, there is, if you, something that Dawn was talking about with the capital programme, just to highlight, if you look at one of the lines in the capital programme, there is still £7,000 for caddies in there. And really nothing under 10,000 should be in there. So this is the part of the tidying up that we were talking about and making sense.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Green? Yep, okay.
So I've got another question. We still see on the out-term report the A13 widening project. When are we going to finally see that come off of here, and when that's going to be finally paid up?
So we do, I mean, I'm anticipating that will be part of the tidying up exercise.
We're not actually doing anything.
Yeah, no, we're not. No, we're not. I think the challenge we've got on the capital programme is our capital programme is huge. It's like a great big list of schemes. That to me is more like an internal working document. That's not usual for a capital programme. So what we need to do is, well as tidy up all the programme, take all the de minimis out, because as Councillor Maurice Cook says, we have a de minimis level. If it's under £10,000, you don't put it in the capital programme. It has to be revenue. We need to tidy that all up, and we need to concertina into, you know, really good service areas of what that capital spend is, and then that sort of breakdown behind that is really just more an internal monitoring document, and that's what we'll be doing. That is the task of our capital programme review, ready for December Cabinet.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yep, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you for the report. You mentioned that we're not progressing as fast as we'd like to on the HRA review process. Why is that?
I think it's just, there's a lot on. We're very busy. And we have deadlines to meet, so we have to bring our HRA business plan to December Cabinet along with the draft HRA budget and MTFS. So we will bring comprehensive plans. I was just being honest in that we would have been a little bit further ahead, but we have got Cabinet deadlines to meet, so we will be receiving them reports on time.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor?
Thank you for that. The only other question I had was on asset disposals. So we're behind on that at the moment. You said we're going to be. I think the numbers were something like we were looking at 34 million, and we got 9 million or something. Just curious if we get to sort of local government reorganisation, those assets that we are trying to sell, if we don't sell them, do we just get to keep them? I mean, if local government reorganisation is supposed to make us more financially stable, then some people might ask, why don't we just not sell them? And then when we're more financially stable, we get to keep them.
So I'll take that one. So yeah, I wish. It's a good try. Yeah, we are slightly behind the curve. There is a lot going on. Obviously, I think it was 117 million, and it's part of our MTFS. So we have to do that. If we don't actually sell what we're going to do, we do have to find something else to plug those holes. So something that we are doing, and it is something that we've looked at. To do business with the council is actually sometimes not as easy as we'd like. There is a lot of bureaucracy, especially when you having to go to cabinet and ask for, is this one going to come up? And then you can start doing your due diligence and everything. And it just takes so much time. So we're actually looking with our finance commissioner on a very simplistic way of making it a lot easier to do business with, and in order to manage our asset disposals, so it doesn't take such a lag to actually get to a decision point. And then obviously after that, you've got to go to market. So I do understand, and it is quite frustrating when you see that there is still opportunities and there's a gap of where we were, of where we should be. So there is some going to Cabinet in September, and then there'll be some more going to Cabinet in October, and we are looking to try and catch that up very quickly to ensure, well, we have no choice. We have to have delivered it by the time we go into LGR. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, just a few from me. Page 155 at 4.6.3, there's a reference to bad debts in the, I think it's nearly £400,000. It's housing benefit bad debt. Is that overpayments that we haven't recovered? I appreciate you might not have the full detail.
Which section is that, please, Councillor?
It's on page 155 at paragraph 4.6.3.
That one? All right, okay. There is also an overspending revenue due to the... Oh. There is also a provision overspending the revenue benefit due to... All right. Oh, sorry. So what we have to do there is that every year we have to review what our bad debt provision should be. And there's a very detailed methodology about how we calculate our bad debt provision. So if we had to put more money into the bad debt provision, that would be a charge to revenue. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I suppose what I'm getting at is it usual for a council of our size to have that level of bad debt?
We do have a level of bad debt at the council, and we will have I can never remember how the sort of standard debt where perhaps, for example, people don't pay for a service. On housing benefits, it's slightly different, because obviously we will have a level of bad debt, and I think our level of bad debt across the council is about 10 million. That is not unusual. I think the challenge that we've got here is that we haven't done any formal write-offs for a while, because we're just waiting for our financial regulations to be approved, and we've got a revised governance arrangement around the write-off. So I think we're just waiting to write off some of our bad debt, which we've got provision for, and then we should see that level of debt across the council come down.
Thank you. Because also the report tells us that there's, to a lesser degree, there's an under recovery of planning income. Reading things like that together, it could lead you to consider that the council has a problem with recovering what it's due. Does when we read things like that, in your opinion, does that tend to suggest the council has more work to be done to recover money that it's owed?
I don't, being honest, I don't think we've got a significant problem. We do have a very good, in the Revs and Ben service, we do have a very, very good debt collection service who are very robust but very fair as well. But it would be, I think one of the things that we haven't yet started reporting in our quarterly monitoring reports is our bad debt position. There's no issue around that. It's just we've just been a bit short of capacity and have had to focus our attention elsewhere. What we do need to do, and it's not in Q1, but it'll be in Q2, is we need to start reporting to Cabinet, and that will come to yourselves, around our debt position, so you get confidence that we have got, you know, that we are minimising our debt. I don't think we've got a major problem around not collecting our income. It could be something as simple as on planning. We forecast a level of income, and maybe just some of the planning applications didn't come through. You will find on things like planning, it might be a little bit volatile through the years, just because of the, you know, because you could assume to get 10 planning applications, you might get 8. But I wouldn't say we've got an issue, but I think what we need to do is we need to start putting our debt collection in the report so we can demonstrate to people this is where we are. And if we do feel we've got some problems about debt collection, or our bad debts are raising too much, why, then we'll be very honest and transparent around that. It won't be in Q1 because we've been focusing on that budget rebasing, where can we move budget, reviewing growth, etc. But we will be putting it in for Q2.
Thank you. Yep, certainly.
I think to give the scrutiny committee some sense of, I understand that. If you look at our council tax collection, we're at like over 98%. Which is high in the high quartile. If you look at our council tax, where people are being supported through their council tax, the collection is over 96%. And if you then compare that as a comparison to other authorities, we're coming out in the upper quartile. So that is all part of the team. And I do think, I probably think that maybe some of the narrative isn't actually helping, because I think, as you know, Dawn said, if you looked at the planning side of it, it could be as simple as the amount of applications just didn't hit. But we can tweak that, and we can learn from that, and you know, to give the committee some assurance that we'll take on board the feedback, because I think it's warranted.
Thank you. I mean, if it is the case of this terminology, I think that it would help to address that, because when you see the words under recovery, it's not the same as lack of income. It suggests the council isn't recovering something that is owed, so it will be helpful to get some clarity on that. Thank you. And I know it's not helpful to cherry pick things out, and if you haven't got the answers, I'm happy for you to come back on these. But the HRA, there's a large overspend on void repairs. I know the report says that work is being done to sort of understand why that's happened and to bring that back online. But can you give us a bit more explanation around, you know, how we've got to this stage and what we're doing to prevent that in future years? Well,
I think, you know, we will have to come back to you on some of that, but I think to understand some more, if you look at our anti-fraud team, Thurrock's anti-fraud team, Tafty, I think if you look at that, last year they managed to recover additional 14 properties that had been subject to, they just weren't being managed by the right tenants in the right way, without going into too much detail. And they probably did need quite a lot of work. So far this year, they have recovered even more, which is really good for people on our housing register, and you know, it's the right thing to do. But we will come back to you with some more information on that, because I think there is probably some more to come back on that.
excellent, thank you. My last question, on page 175, there was an income from previously unaccounted investment sources, which contributed to I think it's 1.2, or just over 1.2 million pounds to the total underspend. Can you tell us a bit more about what those investments were, or what the sources were?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
So-
tail end of the stuff, isn't it?
So what we do is, right. So we have on our divestments program until our investments are divested, we get some income in from them, returns income in from those divestments. Now, when we did last year, we did that significant review of the capitalisation direction calculation, and we unfortunately went up. Part of that review is we need to make we get this income every year, and what we don't do is we haven't. I'm trying to think. We haven't planned for that over a period of time in our CD model. We account for it as and when it's received, and the reason why we do that is because we are trying to divest of all our. We've got about 6 or 7 tail end divestments left, very small. Then we don't want to build it in, then suddenly we have a shortfall. So all we do every year is at the end of the year, we just account for in our CD, in our capitalisation direction model, we just account for the income that we've received in terms of those tail end investments.
Thank you. Are there any last questions?
Sorry, just to make it clear,
Yes,
we
Sharon.
aren't receiving benefits from all of the tail end of the divestments. It's just from a couple.
Okay, thank you. Right, no further questions, I take it. So we'll move to recommendations on page 142. I think because the nature of the report, I will read them all out. So for the reasons set out in this report, the committee has recommended to note the provisional revenue and capital outturn for 2024-2025 as detailed in the report. Is that noted? Note the underspend of 5.844 million against directorate budgets, which includes the sum of 0.965 million contain outbreak management fund, be used to reduce the council's estimated level of exceptional financial support. Is that noted? Note the underspend on the corporate cost budget of 6.403 million is transferred to the council's transformation reserve. Is that noted? Note the transfer of Thurrock's share from the national non-domestic rates pool of 1.645 million to a new revenue reserve to be utilised for the implications of NNDR rebasing. Is that noted? Note the underspend of 7.913 million against the Treasury cost budget to be used to reduce the Council's estimated level of exceptional financial support. Noted. Noted. Note the transfer of the underspend on the HRA account of 5.309 million to the HRA reserve titled Balances HRA. Noted. Noted. And last of all, note that the exceptional financial support requirement for 2024-25 will be subject to the completion of the external audit of the Council's statement of accounts. Noted. Noted. Thank you. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Councillor Morris-Cook, for your attendance tonight. Much appreciated. Okay, so we'll resume the order of business as published on the agenda, and that brings us to item 5, which is devolution paper, pages 19 to 36 of the agenda. Over to whoever.
Thank you, Chair. So this report asks the committee to comment and provide advice to Cabinet on a report that they'll consider later this month. That report asks Cabinet to give consent to the laying and making of the Greater Essex Combined County Authority regulations for 2026 and asks to delegate to the Assistant Chief Exec in consultation with the Leader and Chief Exec to approve any required changes to those regulations. The laying of the regulations of the statutory instrument in Parliament is a formal stage in establishing the Greater Essex Combined Authority. It's embargoed, the statutory instrument itself is embargoed until it's presented in Parliament. However, MHCLG have agreed that the summary, which is appended to the report that you have, can be shared, and that's why it's appended, as I say, and with you today. The statutory instrument is quite light compared with some of the statutory instruments that there have been in the past, and the reason for that is because many of the powers that will be devolved to the combined authority will come through the devolution bill, which was published in July. However, it does cover establishing the statutory instrument does cover establishing the combined authority, some of the transport powers that will sit with the combined authority from day one, some of the general powers, membership of the combined authority, voting arrangements, and some other matters. The rest of the report that you've got provides you with some background information on the devolution programme, some of the principles that have been agreed for the establishment of the combined authority. The leaders across the authorities have agreed they want to start small, but with an agile and adaptable organisation that's able to flex and develop as powers are devolved and as the mayor is elected, and it can grow from there. There's also some reference to the next steps that there will be. So aside from the statutory instrument, obviously the devolution programme continues to prepare for the establishment of the combined authority. In particular, there are arrangements being made to ensure that the election of the mayor can take place in May 2026. So the report refers to the identification of a returning officer. I hope that's sufficient. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Howden.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephen, for the report. I think it's a very positive step and very happy to support it. I would just push back again on this idea that the combined authority has to start small. I think the combined authority shouldn't arbitrarily say it should be small. The combined authority should be the right shape for its function. The mayoral authority is being built to drive economic development. You can't build a strong economy unless you've got a healthy workforce. So I think the idea that the combined authority should purely relegate itself to post-16 education, to strategic planning and strategic highways is a poor suggestion. It should have a formal function to consider social care at that pan-Essex level, at a combined authority level, not only because healthy workforces are productive workforces, but also that the combined authority needs to be in the business of supporting the unitary authorities underneath it, coordinate social care interventions to get costs down. Because ultimately, if the 3 or 4 or 5 unitaries under the combined authority start to buckle under the weight of social care, then that's where 100% of their focus, 100% of their money is eventually going to be absorbed. And as a result, the combined authority will get dragged off track because they won't have the firepower to do the things that they want to do to nurture the economy, because they have to start getting more involved on a day-to-day basis with flailing unitary authorities, because the social care burden has been too isolated. So again, I would just make a pitch that we push back against this rhetoric of the combined authority needs to be small. I think the combined authority needs to be of the right size, and I think that does need to mean it needs to have not a heavy staff complement, but a basic function to have those health and social care conversations to ensure that mentally and physically the combined authority is supporting not just an expanding workforce, but a healthy workforce, and therefore balanced budgets for the 3, 4 or 5 unitaries.
Thank you. So absolutely, the idea is that the combined authority starts small, but not that it stays small. It needs to become the right size to deliver its objectives. It does have one of the powers that is conveyed to the combined authority through the devolution bill is around a health in all policies approach, and obviously how that's implemented by the combined authority will be key to some of the matters that you've talked about. I think there's a recognition that what we're trying to create here is a new organisation that can focus on its remit across, of course, we've got specific powers around transport and adult skills, for example, but there are a number of other more general powers in there. So I've referenced health. Another one is the power of the mayor to convene and draw people together to tackle priorities, mayoral priorities, and priorities that are identified across the patch. So absolutely understand your point about the authority needs to be the right size, and that's what we're trying to make sure that it will be. Although it will start small, it needs to be able to flex and grow and develop as the mayoral priorities become apparent and as those powers are devolved.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Stephen. I do appreciate that. Just to gently push back again on the concept of starting small, the mayor will be elected in May 26. The police, fire and crime powers then are vested in the mayor by April 27. So less than a calendar year. That will involve the influx of hundreds upon hundreds of members of staff. So if we say the combined authority starts small, well, when we say starts, within 11 months' time, there will be more staff that are currently involved in the provision of police and fire functions than all of the other functions currently involved with the mayor and the functions that I believe should be scaled up to a mayoral level. So when we say it will start small, I think even if we're saying it will start small from this point, we need to at least have a marker in the ground and a roadmap for the point at which we want certain functions to become more muscular within the combined authority. Because if we're not careful, the combined authority will accidentally become the police fight and crime commissioner under an alternative name. Because you know what organisational osmosis is like. You have a huge influx from somewhere else, and you can become overwhelmed unless if you've already thought out deliberate ways in which you want to grow and develop.
Thank you. So one of the products that we're trying to deliver before the combined authority starts is a year one plan or a day one plan that will grow into a year one plan to make sure that the combined authority is ready to upscale in the areas that are priorities for the mayor and for the members of the combined authority. I think everyone's very aware of the challenges that there will be with the transfer of the police, fire and crime commissioner functions and all those staff into the combined authority within a year, and we're working really actively and closely with the police, fire and crime commissioner's office now to make sure that we are preparing for that whilst recognising that a big purpose of the combined authority is around economic growth and other things.
If I could just add, Councillor, I think the other aspect of your question is around leadership of the combined authority, and I'd want to assure the committee that both the senior responsible officers and the leaders of the upper tier councils, considering the shape of the combined authority, are also considering the leadership of that authority on an interim and a permanent basis. It is a question on everybody's minds, and it will shape how the culture of the organisation goes forward, both in terms of the number of staff, but how those staff work. And I wouldn't want the committee to think that we'd missed that point in our conversations with our colleagues.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Just one from me. Page 29, in the risk section, the first one there is amber. You might ask why it isn't green. Is there any suggestion? I understand that you can't disclose perhaps some of the confidential conversations you've been having with the other local authorities involved, but why is that amber and not green? Does that perhaps suggest there are chinks in the collegiate approach that we have all been led to believe is there? Why isn't it green then?
No, it's not. It's not because we're aware of any chinks. It's simply because at the time of writing this report, we're obviously on the start of a conversation about the SI and just reflecting that all three local authorities have to agree to consent within a relatively short time frame.
So we're still all friends. Good, glad to hear it. And I mean, I think it's not a given that we have to have devolution, is it? I mean, LGR, it's got to happen. We know that because the alternative is, well, we know what the risks are of that. It's just something that's got to happen. But it's not a given that devolution has to happen, and opinions are divided on whether it's a good thing or not. I'm keen the council in its conversations isn't just simply following the herd, and that we are really making sure that some aspect, and I get that, devolution, there could be some aspects of it that work for us and some aspects that don't, but I'm keen to know how the council's really making sure that this does work for Thurrock residents. And one of the things that concerns me slightly is in respect that, the mayor, whoever they are, they'll have the power to raise business levies on large businesses. Again, it's not a given that they'll do that, but I rather suspect they will. Well, Thurrock is nothing if not, as I would describe it, the powerhouse of Essex. We have more than our fair share of heavy industry, big business. I'm slightly concerned that, businesses in Thurrock might be paying for rural buses in tendering or pothole repairs in Uttlesford. What is the council doing? I'm not a fan of redistribution of wealth as a concept, surprisingly enough, but I get the whole point of devolution. It is about pooling resources and that kind of thing. But at the same time, it would be concerning if we ended up in a situation. I think the council would have failed in its negotiations if we saw hundreds or tens of millions of pounds leaving Thurrock to go to parts of Essex which don't have the luxury of our heavy industry, even though the impact of that industry is felt here in Thurrock. What is the council doing to make sure we don't find ourselves in that position, and that we're safeguarding the interests of businesses and residents here in Thurrock on that particular issue?
So the devolution powers are off the shelf rather than negotiated through the current arrangement. So the powers that are being will devolve to the Greater Essex Combined Authority will be the same as the ones devolved to the others in the priority programme. In terms of the discussions around funding, as you say, they'll clearly be part of the mayoral election process and probably part of the political debate before there's the election of the mayor. I think to give you some reassurance, one of the main purposes of devolution obviously is to draw down funding from government to spend within the Greater Essex area. And whilst we don't have figures yet, the indications are that they will be significant amounts of money to spend on both capital and revenue projects. So there are other sources of income, but you are absolutely right. In theory, if the mayor and the membership of the combined authority agree and approve a decision to use some of the other fundraising powers, then it's within their power to do so.
Okay, thank you. And last question. Southend has been appointed returning officer. What was the process leading to them being appointed as the returning officer? Does that not? I would have thought that function would have sat better with the county council. Just interested to know how we've arrived at that situation.
So we had a discussion across the upper tier authorities and with some districts, and I would say that the returning officer is the chief exec of Southend. It's an individual rather than, as it were, the council rather than, so just making that distinction. The logic behind it is he is an experienced returning officer and will be supported by returning officers in the other local authorities. You have to have a returning officer at a senior level from one of the upper tier councils. I follow your logic, but you might think it was someone from county, but actually county-wide elections are managed by Colchester. So the Colchester is one of the deputy returning officers within this process. That's what the proposal is, supported by someone from Thurrock and from Essex. So it is a team of people with experience from across Greater Essex that have run these elections before. So quite frankly, when you look at the chief execs of the three upper tier authorities, he was the standout candidate. We didn't think that it was appropriate for Thurrock to have, because we have a commissioner to fulfil that role, and the new chief executive of Essex County Council had not been has acted as a returning officer at that stage. So Colin Ansell was by far the standout candidate, and all three upper-tier authorities agreed to that.
Thank you. Any final questions, comments, Councillor Panjala? Yep.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Thank you for the detailed explanation. I have one question about that one, like local jobs, how are we going to improve, like current, what is the current unemployment status, and after this devolution changes, how it will be impact on the unemployment status?
Do you mean employment across Thurrock, general employment
Yes.
levels? Yeah, skills, yeah. So one of the powers that will be devolved to the Combined Authority is management of the Adult Skills Fund budget. That would come in August 2027, provided the Combined Authority has passed all the readiness tests that are set by the Department for Education. When that comes to the Combined Authority, whilst it will still have to meet the statutory duties that have to be funded through that budget, it will have some leeway and some funding in there which it can adapt and flex to prioritise building the right skills for people in this area to get the jobs that are available in this area. So there is a real opportunity there for the Mayor and the Combined Authority to be able to flex around the edges of the education system, the adult education system, to be able to prioritise getting the right skills for the jobs in the area. Beyond that, the Combined Authority will have certain powers around sort of employment support and other things, and obviously implementation of those will depend on the priorities of the Mayor and the priorities of the members of the Combined Authority itself.
Thank you, Officer, for the explanation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Stephen. We'll move to the recommendations. I think it's difficult to formally follow the recommendations, so I'll deviate a bit. I mean, we've commented. I don't think we've got any formal recommendations for Cabinet. I'm just quickly glancing at members, so no, there's no recommendations as such. In terms of giving consent to the laying and subsequent making of the Greater Essex Combined Authority regulations, obviously that's an executive function, so we can't give that consent, but I think it's fair to say if we were Cabinet, we would be giving that consent. We're happy for Cabinet to do that. Yeah. Again, it's not for us to delegate authority to the Assistant Chief Executive in consultation with the leader, blah, blah, blah. But again, if we were Cabinet, we don't have any problems with recommending to Cabinet that they do that. Okay. And of course, we note the progress made on the devolution programme since the last report to Cabinet in March 2025. Noted? Noted. Okay. Thanks very much. So that brings us on to item 6, at page 37 of the agenda, I think, corporate and improvement plan. I believe Sarah was introducing that, but Patrick, have you drawn the short straw? Thank you.
Or the long straw, Chair, thank you. You are presented with a report that will go to Cabinet later this month to present the refreshed corporate and improvement plan. When we wrote and adopted our corporate plan only 12 months ago, the world was a very different place. And we have had the Commissioner's 5th report. They have asked for particular areas of focus. Indeed, we have had updated directions from the Secretary of State and Ministers that they would like to see our corporate plan integrated with our improvement plan. And of course, as we will be discussing at length this evening, local government reorganisation and devolution exist in Greater Essex in a way they did not when the corporate plan was adopted. And therefore we have taken the opportunity to refresh the plan, to take our directions from the government, to reflect the reality for members, our communities and officers of the work we are doing on local government reorganisation and devolution. and to take the opportunity to look at some of the language and focus on some of the outcomes we want to for our residents. I hope that you'll see that the fundamentals of the plan remain in place. The principles that were developed with our staff are still in place, and our overall commitments to being an enabling council and improving council, people and place are still intact. This work goes alongside the PMAF, which this committee has come to know well, and the PMAF framework. We will bring further work on milestones and metrics to this committee as that work is completed. Very happy to take any questions, Chair, but I'll leave the introductions there.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you for the report. I'd just like you to give us an idea about how the corporate improvement plan, we've got the corporate improvement plan, we've got a transformation roadmap, and we've got a place proposition. They all sound like, you know, very corporate documents with a lot of corporate speak in them. 3, I'm sure, you know, substantive documents. So to a resident sort of listening in now, can you give us an idea why we need all 3 and how they complement each other, and that they're not just sort of corporate guff that really isn't going to lead to any substantial changes or whatever?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. I think the job of a corporate plan is to say what we want to do, why we want to do it, and how we're going to do it. I think the interesting thing that underpins this work is that the newly formed teams at the centre of the organisation have looked at the evidence about what the kind of place that Thurrock is, and we have based the priorities in improving, enabling people and place on that evidence. So you would look to a corporate plan as the kind of guiding light for staff and, of course, members about their priorities for the time period. Within that, there's also other activities you would expect a council to undertake, especially a council in intervention. And the transformation roadmap, which is currently being worked on, is a more detailed and granular articulation of how we will change services for the benefit of residents. The way we achieve the priorities in this document is to undertake some work, and the transformation roadmap allows us to articulate that in a way that galvanises the organisation for change to get to those priorities. The place proposition is an interesting development because you would expect policies in an organisation that brigaded work around economic development. I think on this geography at this time, there is a need for Thurrock to stand up for itself in terms of the discussions we're having on local government reorganisation and devolution, as we pulled out in the questions on the previous item. And the place proposition allows us to think about the geography of Thurrock, the needs of those places, businesses and residents, and articulate that for a different audience. I would expect that all of those documents speak to each other appropriately, but they all speak to slightly different audiences, and they should be considered as a suite of documents. We also believe this approach is an example of best practice, and this is how other councils around the country articulate themselves.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Councillor Cecil.
Yes, I picked up your best practice. With all the work that's being done, and each individual council and its officers are getting a very, very good understanding of what's going on in other districts and it's fairly easy to identify best in class. How can we ensure that when we get together, the best in class propositions will be the one that's taken on board?
Is that in reference to the corporate plan council or other activities the council's undertaking?
It's to do with when we combine with 3 or 4 other district councils, what I'm saying is the very good work that officers and senior members have been doing in getting aware of what goes on in Greater Essex, you will have identified that Uttlesford does this very, very well. We should all be looking at that and see what we can take and where it fits. Are you doing that?
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your question. I think it's been really helpful. The process of writing proposals for local government reorganisation has allowed us all across the geography, although we might disagree on a number of councils, to look at the evidence and think carefully about where there is best practice across the geography. We will see in the proposals, as and when they are published from the different councils who have written them, very good examples of those practices. The next stage of the local government reorganisation process, which I think we'll come to in the next item, is actually acting upon and being ready for the decision of the Secretary of State. And when you get to that stage and you know who your bedfellows are going to be for this process, there will be a programme that focuses on that best practice. That has 2 strands for me. That is the best practice experience by officers. Often that's through regional and national organisations about how services are delivered. But there's also a different aspect to this, and the leader may wish to come in. There's also the political best practice that we see, and the leader and her cabinet have really embraced working with other councils around the country in terms of political best practice. And so we would expect to see those in the programmes that go forward in the next stage of local government reorganisation once we have a decision.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you. Can you, obviously, I mean, this lays the foundation, if you like, the framework of what the next stage is. But I suppose for us as a committee, what we always like is to get our teeth into those milestones and metrics. Can you just give us a bit more of an understanding around how we as a committee, when we'll begin to see that new data, when it'll start coming to us?
Thank you, Chair. We are in the process of working with Cabinet Executive Directors and their teams to agree a set of milestones and metrics for the year ahead. I would expect before the end of the calendar year that this committee had an opportunity to comment on those milestones and metrics before they are adopted, and had the opportunity to comment on the first round of data for the first quarter.
Thank you. And this is a genuine question, but in terms of the golden thread, just so we're clear, those looking from the outside in, what is the golden thread, and what should we be looking for? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, the golden thread starts with the corporate plan and goes to Councillor Anderson's question. I would expect, and you should expect, that the documentation we produce in terms of the transformation roadmap and the place proposition not only do lip service to, but live up to the expectations of the corporate plan. I think the other thing that we have successfully undertaken in our teams in the last year, and we will do again as part of the planning process, is service planning on the basis of this corporate plan. So members of the Cabinet and Scrutiny committees would expect to see service plans that identify the priorities, how services will deliver the priorities set out in this plan. The other very important aspect of this, which isn't my area of expertise, but you would also expect to see in the golden thread, is that as well as performance management that this committee sees, so those milestones and metrics about how we deliver and what we deliver, you would expect to see the principles of the priorities in the corporate plan and how we expect our staff to behave in their professional performance management. And I know that colleagues in people services are developing that in line with with the corporate plan too. And so they're the suite of documents where you would expect to see. So all the way from the corporate plan right down to an individual's objectives in terms of members of staff. Everybody should have a good understanding of how their role leads eventually to achieving these priorities under these themes.
Thanks, Patrick. That's helpful. So, move on to recommendations if there's nothing else. Okay, recommendations at page 37, where the committee is recommended to provide feedback and comment on the content of the corporate and improvement plan. I think we've done that. I don't think there's anything to formally agree. And to make any recommendations to Cabinet that it feels is required ahead of their meeting on the 17th of October. I didn't detect any formal recommendations, and I don't have any, but no doubt Cabinet will take on board our comments. Thank you. So, moving on to item 7, which is Greater Essex Local Government Reorganisation, Thurrock Council's proposal for a 4-unitary authority model, and the report can be found at page 79. Is it Patrick, or it says Patrick here, but I don't think it is. I think it's Alex.
It's me. We decided to share a few things out this evening. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, committee. Can I just start by thanking you for your time? I'm pleased to be back here again to discuss this important issue. And
Grovelling will get you nowhere.
but it's true, because we're obviously drafting as we speak and hope to have a final version relatively soon. And we spent time reflecting on the questions that you put to us in the last meeting, and it really has helped us refine the narrative and the detail within that business case. And it is incredibly welcome, because it is quite hard to find sources actually when you're doing something like this where you can get that honest, constructive challenge. So I just want to say it is appreciated. And in that vein, you have before you the covering report that will go to Cabinet later this it is September, indeed September, where we will seek approval to submit the proposal to government. In addition, following your comments, we have supplied the LGR narrative that we are using to support how we present the argument to government and to our colleagues. You have an equality impact assessment and a reminder of the briefing that we gave to all members. Specifically though, within the cover report, we've also provided answers to questions, but more importantly, it gives you an idea of how we are reflecting within the submission, within the business case, how we're going to propose answers to the very good challenges that you put to us in the last meeting. So specifically, you asked about how we were looking at population growth, mortality, and within this report you have the answer as to how we'll respond to that. Adult social care and how we deal with direct payment data to understand what's happening there. The travel to work map and how we've assessed that within the business case. How we look at the challenges around disaggregation of social care from the county. How the 4-unitary model supports the delivery of housing, particularly if you're trying to avoid to develop on the green belt. How we're addressing the health footprint, because obviously that's changing, and indeed that's changed this, announcements this week about ICBs and the geography there, so we'll have to again reflect that within our drafting. I hope helpfully we were asked by the leader of the opposition a very good question, which I slightly mangled around council tax equalisation, but I hope the explanation in the paper aids your consideration on that. The challenges around moving 3 social care systems together and how we're going to approach that within the business case. And then lastly, how we really try and address that issue of remaining as close as we can to communities as we move to a new model of local government. So I hope it's of help to the committee, but I just want to say it's of real help to us as we develop this to try and address some of those interesting questions that you put to us and reflect that within the business case. So we have before you our work so far, and as ever, open to questions. Over to you.
Thanks, Alex. Councillor Green, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alex, for the report. And it's actually quite refreshing to see a report where we can actually understand why you've come to this conclusion and exactly the reasoning behind it. You're obviously, you and your team are doing quite a lot of work, and with that, it's going to cost a lot of money going into the new authority. How are we funding this at the moment?
So Cabinet agreed the budget setting process a drawdown to cover the costs of both local government reorganisation and devolution of £2 million. We have, you'll be pleased to know I'm relatively tight in terms of how we manage our budgets, and we've done as much as we can within house, but we are managing those costs where we buy in specialist support where we need it, because as you know, as your questions have highlighted from this committee, you need some detail analysis. But we've kept it as lean as possible to develop the business case. I think that's obviously right and prudent to do with public funds, but I'm also very conscious that actually the more challenging part of this is how we then implement it. So I want to make sure that we retain as healthy a balance as possible, so that once the government has made a decision and we look at implementation, we have some resource at our disposal to help aid working through what that means in reality.
Yep, come back, Councillor Green.
So going into May of 2028, when the new authority comes online, we don't know yet how full funding until the government's made the decision.
So as always, whenever you talk about local government finance, it's complex and it changes all the time. So we have designed, as have others that are putting forward proposals for the government to consider, a model of local government finance based on funding the pressures and the opportunities as we know now, and we've reconfigured it as best we can. We also know, obviously, the government is currently consulting on a fair funding model for local government, and that may well change. We also know that pressures within the system are growing in real time, and the government will have to respond to that. So in truth, we have done what we can to model the financial situation as we see it now and how we think it could grow over a number of years. But in reality, the government will have to deal with the situation as it faces it in 2028, and that's a part of wider financial considerations for the government and the pressures that we face here. But I'm confident that we have done as much as we can, and the reason I'm confident is that we have drawn on sources that we use, but also sources that have been externally challenged elsewhere, because I think across all of the business cases we recognise that we needed it to be as robust and as credible as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Howden next, and then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alex, for the report. I appreciate the time we've had with Councillor Holloway's committee to go over some of the rationale. I appreciate the work that you've been doing to bolster your argument for the 4 unitary model. Can I ask, is there a specific reticence for why there's not a more forthright approach when it comes to spelling out the deficiencies with the 5 model? Because I appreciate the commentary that has been made about trying to model a council as much as you can around natural communities and engagement with communities, which is very much the narrative from the 5 side. But we know there are acute financial problems with the 5 model. We know there are acute logistical problems with the 5 model. So is there a reticence that I don't fully understand as to why we're not just simply more robust with this is why we think the economics of 5 just doesn't stack up?
A very good question. I don't think there's a reticence on our part. I think there's a judgment to be made. I think the merits of the 4 model as we've designed it speak for themselves. It's not a perfect science, and I think we are keen that we don't go, as it were, negative, and we really advocate for the 4 model in the way that we think it really works for Thurrock and that it works for Greater Essex. But you are quite right that when there are some fundamental concerns, for example, the management of debt, where we think that the 5 model could be deficient, we are spelling that out within our business case. And there is also, on that particular matter, we need to bear in mind that there is a formal role for commissioners where each of the SROs, the equivalents of me leading the other business cases elsewhere, are meeting with commissioners in order to explain to them how the finances, particularly around Thurrock's debt, and how that's managed in their model. So I think we are clear in our proposal about some of the concerns, but we're really trying to champion and demonstrate why we think our model is the strongest, but at the same time playing our role as best we can. But we'd always welcome any kind of advocates that want to work with us to highlight deficiencies would be very welcome.
Yep. You want to come back, Councillor Howden?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Alex. I would politely push back and suggest that I don't think it's being negative to stretch outside of just talking of the attributes of the system that you want and ensuring that people are cognizant of some of the challenges. So, for example, one of the things I would point to is if you look at the distribution of deprivation, health inequalities and education care plans with at least 3 of the authorities, certainly I think about Thurrock and Basildon combined, I think you would be hard-pressed to model a workforce where you find a highly qualified Director of Adult Social Care, Director of Child Social Care, Director of Public Health, all statutory roles, who look at an authority with that level of combined demographics and say, I want to do this job. So I don't think that's being excessively negative to say that. I think that's just being factual, upfront, and just forthright with the risks, because I just don't think you can talk about the opportunities of one model without talking about the inherent risks of another.
I do agree. And within our business case, you can't make a choice without an options appraisal. It is as simple as that. And it's quite clear, you know, we that's within our proposal. And I do agree with you, and I apologise if I wasn't particularly clear. There are certain red lines that we think just make certain aspects of the other models just undeliverable, for example. And we do need to be crystal clear about that and be clear that there is a risk within the system if the government chose to do that. So I think that I am confident that we are doing that. It is crystal clear within the proposal. There's a way of doing it, that's all. And other business cases can do it how they choose to. But we have a very clear options appraisal that highlights the concerns that we have with certain aspects of the other models, yes.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Howden? No? Okay. Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alex, for your report. It was reported recently that the government hadn't done a cost analysis for this round of local government reorganisation, and that they were basing costs on 2020 report, I think it was commissioned by the county council, whatever the, yeah. And they're now saying that they've re-looked at it, and they're not actually sure that, because they were saying it was potentially going to save 2.9 billion. They're now saying that they're not sure that that's going to be the case and it's not going to save anything. You've been living and breathing this for the past however many months. I just thought I'd get your opinion on that as you've been part of this process. Have you sat there and thought, oh, yeah, I don't think this is going to save much, or what's your sort of response to that?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to comment on a particularly challenging question there. My first answer would be it's a matter for the government to explain what they're doing, but in my experience of working through this business case and elsewhere, I think local government reorganisation does drive out savings within the system, without a doubt, and there is always questions over that level. I think the important thing to bear in mind that we sometimes miss when we think about this round of local government reorganisation is actually the perspective of the end user, the community that we serve, and that isn't to sidestep the discussion, because actually what we're talking about now is ending two-tier local government. And I think actually when you're accessing public services, you as an individual or someone that you care for, you want to be able to have the fastest access to the right people that can prescribe the support that you need, whether it be adaptations or sorting out your house or whatever it may well be. And in two-tier local government, who colleagues do the best jobs that they can, but fundamentally because of the model, if you've got a vulnerable person with care needs and you're having to deal with your hospital, your GP, your district council for housing needs, your county council for social care needs, it's a very complex picture. So although I think there are definite efficiencies that can come out of local government restructuring, I think the real advantage is actually about public service reform and making it easier for the communities that we serve to access those services better. Thank you.
Patrick?
If I may as well, Councillor, I think it's important to remember the aspects of this programme that we can control. It's incumbent on us to put forward a proposal that we believe makes the best use of public funds in the future and addresses the pressures across the local government system that we all know exists. We are, of course, dependent on ministers and the Secretary of State to make a final decision. Our role in this work is to ensure that we're getting the best out of the public pound for the proposal that we put forward, and in the way that Councillor Haldon has described this evening, making a robust case that challenges where we think that in other parts of the system that won't be the case. We hope that our proposal will do that to complement what Alex has also described.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, thank you for that particularly diplomatic answer as well. I appreciate that. Might be more of a comment. I thought I'd thank you for the narrative that you've put in there, because that was something I'd particularly requested last time. I appreciate that. It does help me. I am a touch sceptical on how we've sort of ranked things from low to high, just because on one of the criteria you've got efficiency, capacity and withstanding shocks, and you know the 3 and the 4 authority model have both been given a rating of medium. You know, I understand there can be sort of, you know, within medium there's a range of mediums, but I think the 3 unitary model would be considerably better in that regard. So I was a bit sceptical of that, to be honest. And then the only other comment is a lot of the sort of for council argument when it comes to you know, being in touch with local residents, etc., you know, it's a bit smaller. I just still, from what we've got in here, I still don't really see how a council where we're paired with people in Harlow is particularly feels particularly more local than a council where we're paired with people in Southend. So in that regard, I'm still unconvinced there, but I appreciate the slightly more detailed narrative.
Thank you. There are indeed varying degrees of medium. You are quite right, and we need to bring that detail out because, for example, you know, we look at the tax base of a larger authority with more business rates, with more council tax. You're able to withstand some of the pressures more than if you're a smaller authority. But it's all slightly, there are so many different variations because you can also look at the sustainability of your local community. I think we talked before in a presentation about the GVA and individuals, smaller communities, about parts of Essex where they are more vulnerable to downturns in the economy. And so that wider question of sustainability needs to pick up both of those. It is quite nuanced, and I take on board your comment, and we need to bring that out a little bit more, and we certainly will. In terms of local community engagement, it's a fair challenge, and the leader and I have been speaking to other councils about that. And there's an enormous amount of really good practice and variation across Greater Essex about how how people at the moment engage with their communities. And to an extent, you don't really want to lose that. No. So on one hand, you can talk about the scale of it, you know, 5 might be better than 3, as it were, but I think, I'm not a councillor, but I would imagine all members would recognise it's about the personal input that you have and the connection with your community and the levers that you have at your disposal to really reach out and to support them. And actually that's the part that we need to bring out more. It's about the practice and how you engage and work with your community. And that's the stronger part, regardless of whatever model. And I think there are certain things like that that we need to just be honest about, that's just about good practice, about how you engage with your community. And we'll bring that out within the proposal.
Yep, you will come back.
Yeah, I largely agree with that, and I think it's why it's a little bit odd that we put so much weight on suggesting that the 4-council model is better than 3-council, 5, because ultimately you could have a 4-council model, and if you've got a load of terrible councillors like Councillor Halden, then obviously it's not going to be a great council. If you've got if you've got a council with 3 authorities, they're a lot bigger, more far away from residents, if you like. But if you've got good councillors, then it'll be fine.
Very fair comment. Yeah, it is about practice sometimes rather than just the mechanism.
Councillor Fox, I believe you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Alex, thank you very much for your report. Seeing how big this is for Thurrock, and more importantly, how big this is for the residents of Thurrock, and the time frame that there is now between now and the 17th of September when the Cabinet meeting is, I believe there should be an extraordinary full council meeting so this can be put through to every councillor.
Thanks, Councillor Fox. So you'll be aware that next Wednesday we will print the paper that will go to Cabinet the following week. And today there has been already a call for an extraordinary meeting, and that meeting will happen. Officers are looking to see when that meeting can be fitted in. I know no more than that. I've not seen the call. I don't know who signed for the call. I just know that there's been a call for an extraordinary meeting. It's absolutely, I always wanted the 3, the 4 and the 5. Now Essex are not printing theirs till the 10th either, and I believe that there's 2 4s now. So there will be 2 4s, a 3 and a 5 to debate. So it's quite a hefty meeting. But I think that, and I'm really, and some of it may be going back to like Councillor Anderson and his questions. You need the 3, the 4 and the 5 all together so that you can see the threads for how they think they're going to engage with their residents and their communities, and how whatever they're setting up and how they're going to handle the services. So I think it's absolutely key that we do have that debate in this chamber. It will still stay an executive decision of Cabinet to vote on that, but there is a 5, there has been a call, officers are aware of it. When that will be, I don't know. I can't, I've not even seen the email that's called for the meeting. But I agree with you. You've got to have an opportunity for 49 councillors to have their say. 49 councillors will not determine whether we're getting 3, 4, 4 or 5, because it will then, this is what goes into government for them to then come out and consult, and you'll have your say on what you think is best during that government consultation. And then, after all of this and all of these meetings and everything that's happened and everybody spending their life around local government reform for best part of a year, the Treasury will make a decision in February or March. But I think it's absolutely key, you're right, that we do have, you may have been one of those ones that put your name on that. I don't know, because I've not seen it, all I know is there is one. And I've never shied away from the fact that why we did this was to make sure that there was enough choice. I never believed that 3 and 5 had all the answers and gave the best options. So what I wanted to do was to make sure that we give residents, councillors, residents and the government enough, and so that people do get a chance to see what real change looks like, because this isn't about us. This is about 10, 20, 30 years. So it's about making sure that we get that right. But you're right, there should be and I've never said that I didn't want that. I absolutely do. And yeah, and so we'll be bringing that to the Chamber, Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I'm not looking for an answer on this, it's just an observation, but it should be noted that the reason we're having this meeting is because backbench councillors have used the Constitution to force it rather than the administration bringing it. At the last corporate ONS, it was a specific recommendation that you go away and you look at calling an extraordinary full council. I never got a reply to that, but if we're going to sort of, throughout this process, maintain that narrative that we're open, we're transparent, blah blah blah, I do think it would have been better if it was the administration bringing about that full council meeting rather than it being left to members to use a provision in the Constitution to force it. But as I say, that's just an observation. It's really not relevant as a point of debate. But I think it would have been helpful in the spirit of transparency. But we never got a reply. I mean, it was a specific recommendation, and actually, you're saying you welcome that meeting. It's only come about because I'm not a signatory. I don't know who's called the meeting, who signed the letter, but it's come about because members have had to use a provision in the Constitution. But I too welcome that meeting when it comes, and we'll all be able to have. It's all very well going to things where you can ask questions, but it's clear members want to have a forum in which they can have a debate. So I think we all welcome that opportunity. Yep, does that answer your question, Councillor Fox?
Absolutely.
Yep. Councillor Holloway.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in calling for a full meeting, in the spirit of openness, transparency and honesty, I don't have a problem with that. And I think at the moment, maybe the timing for that meeting is about right. Possibly one of the reasons that we shouldn't have done it beforehand is I wouldn't have liked it being dealt with in this chamber where we were dealing with the business of other councils who we might or might not be aligned with, all 15 of them, being debated across the chamber and going out to the public media, talking about the business of council that their own residents might not be aware of. Now we're at this point in the joint submissions. Yes, the time's right. However, I reiterate, if we'd have done it earlier, I think that would have been appropriate, but I do not have a problem that we go forward with it at this time. No further comments, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Howden and Councillor Cecil.
Yeah, just one out of practicality, Alex. Once we get out of this relatively myopic process and there's the wider consultation, obviously there are more people factually who want the 5 model. That means there are more communications departments lined up to pump out stuff during the consultation. It probably means that there are physically more boots on the ground trying to galvanise businesses and other partners to respond positively with regards to 5. So will we eventually see some type of battle plan for that once this process is out of the way? The main fight, which is how are we going to manage the process of galvanising allies during the actual consultation period? Because at the moment there are just a lot of people stacked up on the other side. So when will we see a plan to make sure that we're actually battle fit? Because quite frankly, this, Councillor Worrell has a majority. She'll pass it through her cabinet one way or another. So we know that we will make a submission factually. So when we see a battle plan for how we're going to manage the actual public consultation.
You're right, and we are developing one. We do need a little bit more clarity from the government in terms of their time frame and the nature of their consultation. There will be people lobbying in many different ways, without a doubt, sometimes publicly, sometimes privately, and we have been doing so, as you would expect, on behalf of Thurrock, in order to advance what we're doing and the rationale behind it. But we will bring back to you our strategy for galvanising support during that public consultation. I think it is worth bearing in mind that the consultation is important, And if we can get businesses and the VCS, certainly within Thurrock and Patrick, as I'm engaging with them on that basis to see what their views are, is particularly advantageous for us. But at the same time, the core of the decision the government will take will be about the evidence around the criteria that they've set to make a decision. So I think we've done that first part as effectively as we could, and you're right, we need to mobilise as many people as we can to demonstrate why we think this is the right balanced approach for Greater Essex.
Councillor Cecil.
Thanks, Chair. I read through the Community Equality and Impact Assessment, and I started to feel uncomfortable that there was so much in there where you seem to be saying you haven't got the information as yet available. The data is to be coming or will appear. How comfortable are you with the fact that you've got so much in that assessment that you're still looking for information from?
So from a quality impact assessment, there are a number of things that we need to consider.
Sorry, Councillor Cecil, could you turn off your microphone, please?
So from a quality impact assessment perspective, there are a number of things that we need to consider. And as you rightly point out, there are areas where we need to have a little bit more detail, and that detail will flow once decisions are made. But qualities impact assessments are a picture across a number of different services. So for example, putting LGR to one side, all the decisions that we take as a council, the services that we run, need to think about how it impacts communities. So those component parts now, so if you're running a housing service, you think about, am I doing something in a particular way that excludes a vulnerable group of community? How does this policy land with a particular minority, and am I making sure that it's accessible? So I'm confident that there are component parts of a qualities assessments across this council that we can consider, and we know that we are doing the right thing. I think it is adequate for when we are putting together the proposition to put to government. I think where this really, really bites is when the decision is taken and you think about implementation. Just as we run our services now and think about how this impacts people, those new councils, whatever the configuration is, will have to think about how they develop those services so that it's managing all of those issues that we all consider within impact assessments at that point. So I think we are just being honest and clear in the impact assessment that we can go as far as we can now. The next part of it is when you're designing those new councils.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I accept your point because, I thought so much still to find out, so much still unknown. But you've answered well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howden.
So just a very quick one, Leader. You mentioned the other four, that there's another option for 4 on the table. I was under the impression you could only table a submission if you were an upper tier authority.
The invitation from the Secretary of State was to all authorities affected by local government reorganisation, which specifically was defined as counties, districts, cities, boroughs, and unitaries that are next door to those 2-tier areas, so they are able to submit it, and it is Rochford that will be proposing the alternative 4 model.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Can I just ask a few? At the last meeting, I think it was you, Councillor Worrell, you said that after that meeting you'd be having, in detailed conversations with the other local authorities in the council's preferred model. Can you just tell us what dialogue there's been with Brentwood, Epping Forest and Harlow, and is there support for the Thurrock Council's proposition from those councils?
So we've met 3 so far, and we do have them in the diary. So it's not just those councils that we're meeting either, we're meeting other councils. And we had a really good meeting today. And so and they said that actually They just wish they could have worked with us that bit earlier. You know, that we didn't come forward with the 4 that much earlier because we all believed that we would be better provided for. You know, this is why we're doing this. Don't forget why we're doing this. I didn't think Thurrock was provided for well enough in any of the other 2 models. So they're absolutely, they're not having their meetings yet. They've not had their meetings. They've talked to us. We've given our presentation and they're going away to speak to their members. So, of course, they're still aligned to where they are, you know, because that's where they've submitted they've done all their work, you know, but are they actively going to fight against us? I don't know, but they've welcomed us. It's been really encouraging to speak to other councils who absolutely get the reasons why we've followed the criteria, we used the evidence, you know, we've done everything that the government set out. 500, all has to be equal, you know, we've either got a port or an airport, you know, growth is shared, and they absolutely get the logic of it, you know, so it's been an experience. I can't say that everybody's gone, yeah, absolutely, we love it, you know, but at the same time, one did say there was always maybe going to be one of these models that come along that sat on the outside and came through in the middle straight away. So 5 went very early, 3 was there, you know, and 4 has come along. But, you know, our business model is really good, you know, and I'm pleased that we're having this meeting so that you can see the amount of work that's gone into it and the logic of why we're doing it and why it's the right thing for Thurrock. So, yeah, it's been interesting. It's been mixed, Councillor Boney, I would say, but some of them have absolutely welcomed, you know, our findings.
Thanks for that. And just in relation to, we seem to have shifted slightly. I mean, my understanding is when the government first said what it saw new local authorities should look like, the 500,000 residents was at least 500,000. Some of the reports I've been reading kind of now make it look like that's the target. It should be 500,000. But that's the minimum that the government is looking for, is my understanding. If we look at the report tells us that 3 of the 4 proposed local authorities under the 4 model won't reach that threshold, or they're not projected to reach or exceed that threshold until 2044. That's sort of 20 years in the future, by which time we'll probably be having a whole nother debate around what sustainability looks like in local government and what minimum population should look like. Does that not right there kind of blow a bit of a hole in our proposition that the minimum the government's looking at, not the target, the minimum is 500,000 residents, and only 3 of the 4 local authorities that we're proposing will reach that in 20 years' time?
Okay, thanks, Chair. So that changed very, very quickly, and it was a guide. And if you look at the 5, none of them are 500. You know, none of them.
The 5, let's be, the 5 is good. That's not going to sell.
So,
no one's seriously taking that as an option.
It was a guide, and that changed very, very. In later guidance, it changed that it was a target. It wasn't a minimum. It changed very, very early that they would accept bids. That you had to give a solid case as to your numbers and why you got to your numbers. So it changed very, very early. So, you know, I use that 500 as, you know, an informative that's where we started. But it was a guide rather than we're going to chuck you out if you do not get to the 500. It changed very, very early.
Because I think realistically, I mean, we're right to, I mean, for all the reasons Councillor Howland has said, we're right to focus on the arguments against 5, but without being complacent. I'd be very surprised if any Mandarin or minister in Westminster is seriously going to give the 5 option any credence at all. I think that's going to be lighting the fires very soon. I mean, it just, you know, doesn't tick any boxes. It's going to be 3 or it's going to be 4. And I suppose really, I think if it is 5, then it kind of goes against all the justification really for local government reorganisation and the arguments that the government has been putting forward. It's really a competition, if you like, between 4 and 3. Do we not feel that actually those advocating for 3, when it comes to the facts and the arguments, have they not got the edge on us? It does seem that way. It seems that we're couching too much of our argument around political sentiment rather than the evidence.
No, I absolutely. I think that we have done everything based on evidence. We said we would be evidence-based. Everything that we've done is evidence-based. We've presented you with the evidence. And you could swing it the other way. If the guide was 500, then 726,000 is way over the biggest unitary, you know, to ever to be developed. So I just think that each business case, as I say, like, I think that you have to take them on their merits. The government will take them on their merits of the information that's been provided in them. So I wouldn't count out the 5, you know, from government's perspective. You know, I know they've got to meet the commissioners. The Essex have got to meet commissioners, and so as our officers have got to meet commissioners. So I think that at this stage, and there's another 4, you know, so of course the commissioners have to go and meet the other councils.
Thank you. This might be a question for you, Alex. We had a lot of, I think the last meeting, one of the single biggest issues was around sustainable travel and travel plans. I think there's a vein of thinking that I fully sort of get behind, that the new local authority that we're proposing doesn't even have the bones of a sustainable travel plan or travel interlinkages. I know we had a conversation about that, but you undertook to go away and get some information and present back to us around travel movements. I think there's no narrative other than see Appendix 3. Can you just give a bit of context to what that document at Appendix 3 is actually telling us?
Certainly, and we did indeed have a good discussion. I remember Councillor Cecil talking about the importance actually of the route from Thurrock through Brentwood all the way up to Harlow, and it is a lived experience of many people. So the map that we have here at the Appendix 3, first and foremost, I would just say it excludes London. It is purely about travel to work zones within Essex, and you can see here that there are indeed particular routes where people travel more strongly than others. There is a very strong connection, for example, between Harlow going into Epping Forest. There is a very strong connection between Grays and into Basildon. There is a weaker connection, admittedly, to Brentwood, and a very strong connection between Basildon and Southend. This is a guide to give you an understanding of the map of Essex. So if you were to look at the configuration of the 4 that we are proposing, if you were to include London, you again have a far stronger commonality between, as a commuter town around the M25, you have that strength there, and that is the common pattern between Harlow, Brentwood, Epping, and Thurrock. But even if you look at it without London, there are still those stronger connections, but there are other connections here that again align with the model for 4. So, for example, if you're looking at the Uttlesford, Braintree, Chelmsford model that we have suggested as the middle, I'm forgetting what we call it, the middle configuration. There is a strong connection there between Braintree and Chelmsford. it's interesting to see that you don't get movement at all within Saffron Walden around there and within Uttlesford. So what this demonstrates is that there's a very mixed picture in terms of travel to work journeys, people, how they spend their leisure time. And there is no one clear definitive answer that says that is the answer for local government reorganisation. And that is true for every single piece of evidence around local government reorganisation. There is no one definitive answer for any of this. It is a balance across a number of different pictures. And we think when we talk about travel, it isn't about do I go regularly to Harlow? It is more important to understand the travel issues that the residents in Harlow face, the residents in Epping face, and Brentwood and Thurrock. And we are all impacted by train routes, for example, into London. We are all impacted about the use of the M25. And it's that kind of issue around transport and strategic transport that an authority of that size needs to start thinking about, rather than just a bus route. That's what I think this map is telling us. And that's what we need to consider within the business plan.
I think I'd counter that by saying that, you know, once you create a new local authority, it's never going to be a community, but there will be services within that new local authority area that all residents should be able to access. So how people travel around a local authority is vitally important. And really what this tells me is what I already knew, is that there seems to be a lot of movement between Thurrock into Basildon, because of course from Basildon you can get to other destinations, but there's a clearly defined travel corridor, if you like, or travel movements between Thurrock, Basildon, Southend, that estuary area, which just screams commonality. People aren't travelling those distances because they've got nothing else to do, and they fancy a little trip along the C2C line, or they're travelling into Basildon to go on to somewhere else. There is a clearly defined movement of people, not just necessarily for work, you know, for all manner of reasons, which there isn't going up to Brentwood, going up to Harlow, going up to Epping Forest. Yes, all of those areas have lots of people who travel into London, but they will do because Essex is a home county. You could pick that argument up and you could say about any part of Essex, any part of any home county. The home counties are there, really, so people can commute into London. There's been, since the Second World War, movement of people out of London and then moving back in for work or leisure, whatever. So that this idea that we're linked because we all go into London to work and leisure, you could say that's what unites us with Basildon and Southend, because they're doing exactly the same thing. So it's not really an argument. I come back to it. I'm really concerned that you can never have a coherent, sustainable travel plan for a local authority such as we're proposing, and that is really important. It's no good just saying, "Oh, that'll be the mayor's job." That's not strategic travel. That's local authorities planning how you provide the means for your residents to travel around within a local authority area to access those services, which they're all paying for, which will inevitably be more dispersed in a local authority of that size. I can't see how there is any justification for saying that we can ever have a coherent, sustainable travel plan.
Firstly, I think this map is only about commute patterns within Essex, and as I say, excludes. So to counter that, if you were to look at, and I highlighted that there's very little for Saffron Walden, if you were to include Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire, big thick lines out there, you know, that's what their lived experience is. I would question whether any resident purely lives their life based on the boundaries of the services or the administrative area. You know, the hospital you are born or you go to, predominantly within Thurrock, is not in Thurrock. You know, people go outside of that. It is not purely defined by the administrative boundary. Where authorities now need to be smarter and thinking about how they support their communities is working with each other. Every single road, every single bus connection usually goes beyond an administrative boundary. And it isn't just, you're right, I do agree, it isn't just about the mayor, but actually it's about all of those new authorities when they are developing their strategic plans for transport, working with each other. And secondly, when you think about accessing services to a council, it goes back to the point about making sure that that new larger authority has that better connection to its communities, and it is thinking about, for example, if you're thinking about longer term health care, we all know the answer to that is preventative. It's about how you divert that demand, and that is usually about personalised intervention within people's lives at a local community level by the voluntary and community sector. And it isn't necessarily about travel, not purely, but it isn't about travelling across a large area. It's about community-based interventions and support. So there is a point, and you are quite right. I do agree there are challenges, but it's not also, but it is a more complex picture than that, and that's what we need to demonstrate. We need to make sure that the geography works to think about the strategic, but also not losing sight about how you make sure that those communities can access those services in a functional, logical way for them.
Thank you. I'm really concerned. I mean, in terms of the free pool should be, you know, I don't need to speak to the opportunities that's going to provide. And there are opportunities which are going to be felt in Thurrock. There are opportunities that are going to be felt in Basildon and Southend and all along that estuary corridor. My real concern is that, you know, councillors and even council officers in Harlow and Epping Forest who are not really going to feel the benefits directly of the free port unless they're pillaging the money that is generated here. Their residents can't come and work here unless they drive because there are no transport links. But I'm really concerned that we're turning our back on the free port, which should be centre stage of any new local authority that we're proposing. And I just think that those other local authorities, trying to engage them on how essential the free port is going to be very difficult. Are we not turning our back on the free port to some extent when other local authorities like Basildon and Southend will be fully signed up to the idea of the free port and the benefits that it brings? Are we not turning our back on the free port? Are we not turning our back on our estuary heritage, if you like, which we've trumpeted at every opportunity since the moment that Thurrock became a unitary authority?
No, I mean the free port brings benefit to Thurrock. It brings benefit to Thurrock now, and it will in the long term. It does bring benefit to neighbours. I mean, people that work within the free port do actually commute in from. I've looked at the analysis from Harlow, from Brentwood, from Basildon. You know, they draw their workforce, and including from Kent and from London. I mean, the economic prosperity that the free port brings ignores administrative boundaries. It goes way beyond that. The key relationship we have with the free port is we obviously have an element of retained business rates that we will use to support public services, but as the planning authority, we have to work with the free port to make sure that we do what is necessary to unlock the development that is needed for that to prosper. And also it goes back to the question around skills that we had earlier. It's about working with the free port to understand their needs in the long term. It's about, as Patrick was saying, developing our proposition for place for Thurrock, to understanding what our needs are so that we can really galvanise the public sector to deliver the skills agenda that we need with the mayor, that delivers the workforce that the Freeport needs, and that workforce lives within our community. I don't think we're turning our back at all on the Freeport. I think the Freeport needs the opportunity to be part of a big agenda across Greater Essex, working with London and the rest of the country. It is a gateway into the southeast, it is a gateway into London, and it has links with companies in the Midlands indeed as part of that supply chain. So I would also argue, not wanting to go back to transport, but when you think about Freeport connection of the M25, M11, again there is that logic there of having an authority that helps support that.
Okay, somehow I think we're going to be hearing a lot more around that. But are there any final questions or comments before we move to the recommendations? No. Okay. So we are recommended to provide scrutiny over the approach taken to articulate the case for 4 councils and the narrative. I think we've done that. We've provided comments. I don't think there's much point going through these recommendations and formally agreeing them, to be honest. And I think it's clear there's probably a range of opinions. There's no emerging one opinion amongst this committee. So I'm hoping, as they did very ably at the last meeting, the clerk will have captured all the views and any requests there were for other information, and that will be summarised in the next report, which was really very helpful. So I think we're just happy to say the recommendations. We've done them. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So that, I think, brings us to, is it the work programme? Yep, it's the work programme. Are there any comments? Did you want to say anything on that, Lucy, on the work programme, or are you just happy for us
No,
to...
I'm happy for question and comment on the work programme and the action log and recommendations tracker. Thanks, Chair.
There's no changes or anything that we should know about in relation to what's on the agenda?
No, I think it's all as standard. Sorry, Chair. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so in relation to both those, the work programme and the action log, are there any comments or questions? We're happy just to note them. Okay, thank you very much. So I think that brings us to the end of the meeting at 9:10. Thanks everybody for your attendance. Thank you, leader. Thank you, officers, and have a good evening. Thanks everybody.